How do we love those who never will love us? It's a conundrum. I remember I spent a lot of my life trying to win everybody over. I wanted everybody to like me. That was a no-win opportunity right there. I wanted to share with you these words they were part of a message from Harvard professor and one of the leading scholars of religion in America, Professor Diana Eck. And she read these at the installation service for my colleague, the Reverend Galen Gingrich at All Souls Unitarian Church in New York City when he was being installed. And this is what Dr. Diana Eck said. The world has need of your theology. If there ever were a time that we need to spin out a new fabric of belonging and a wider sense of we for the human community, it is certainly now. In a world divided by race and by religion and ideology, the very presence of a church like yours is a beacon. You have a theological orientation that is essential for the world of religious differences in which we live. You are, in my estimation, she says, the church of the new millennium. In this era, Unitarian Universalism is not the lowest common denominator, but the highest common calling. That was a high praise from Dr. Diana Eck about this tradition of which All Souls is a part. She says, in a world divided by religion and so much more, and I'm thinking about division and all of this, I'm reminded of the comedian Emo Phillips' story he calls The Heretic. He said, I was walking across a bridge one day, and I saw a man standing on the edge about to jump. So I ran over and I said, stop, don't do it. Why shouldn't I? He said. I said, well, there's so much to live for. He said, like what? I said, well, are you religious or atheist? He said, religious. I said, me too. Are you Christian or Buddhist? He said, Christian. I said, me too. Well, are you Catholic or Protestant? He said, Protestant. I said, me too. Are you Episcopalian or Baptist? He said, Baptist. I said, wow, me too. Are you Baptist Church of God or Baptist Church of the Lord? He said, Baptist Church of God. And I said, me too. Are you original Baptist Church of God? Or are you Reformed Baptist Church of God? He said, Reformed Baptist Church of God. And I said, me too. Are you Reformed Baptist Church of God Reformation 1879? Or Reformed Baptist Church of God Reformation 1915? He said, Reformed Baptist Church of God Reformation of 1915. And I said, die, heretic scum, and I pushed him off the edge. So that's Emo Phillips. That's humor, but history is full of people killing each other over religious differences. The joke pokes fun at how many Christian churches have divided over various beliefs, but we see the same thing happening in Buddhism, in Japan, and other places. We see it in Hinduism in India. We see it throughout Islam around the world. We just see religious differences causing people to literally kill each other, and certainly to have conflict, breaking up families, and all kinds of other relationships. And if people who are of the same religion, even the same denomination, sometimes even in the same congregation, cannot find enough grace to tolerate their differences, then how can we ever expect our country, with all of its divisions and diversity, to ever come together across our great diversity? It's been said that one generation's heretics are often the next generation's heroes. I mean, even in religion, Jesus was considered a heretic by the people in his time. The Buddha was as well by the people in his own culture, because they didn't ascribe to the common beliefs and the way of doing religion or life that was provided by those who came before in their culture and their time. Well, Unitarians have been deemed heretics by others since the Spanish doctor Michael Servetus was burned at the stake in 1553 in Geneva, Switzerland. And Hungarian Unitarian David Francis, considered the founder of the Unitarian Church in Europe, died imprisoned in a dungeon for the crime of religious innovation a few decades later. Francis was famous for writing Europe's first declaration of religious toleration. And it was at the time when people were killing themselves all across Europe, Catholics and Protestants, killing each other and killing Jews, and that's when he wrote this proclamation of religious toleration, and it was the first of its kind in Europe. Now, here in the United States, shortly after the Revolutionary War, in and around Boston and Concord, and also emanating out of the scholarship at Harvard University, there was a growing sense that in this new democracy that we were creating, that religion needed to employ reason and intellect and science and history, and could not simply be rooted in belief in old creeds and unquestioned pre-scientific scriptures. These revolutionary thinkers came to be called Unitarians by their critics, because like Servetus and Francis, they found no strong argument for the Trinity in the Bible. So since they didn't believe in the Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, they were called Unitarians. And then there were the Universalists, and they had a belief, a heresy, if you will, that God's love was so strong that all people are saved. They believed that God would drag everybody, kicking and screaming, if necessary, into heaven. That was their idea so many years ago. My late colleague, Frank Schulman, wrote, in the early 1800s, the Boston heresy, as it was known, spread rapidly. A radical change was taking place in Boston religion, a great change, and quickly. Calvinism was being replaced by Unitarianism. Unitarian William Ellery Channing was taking the place of Jonathan Edwards, and Ralph Waldo Emerson was ascending into the pulpit once led by Cotton Mather. These are some of the most strict and stern voices of Christian religion in the early days of the American Republic. And yet their pulpits were now being taken over by these radical, progressive voices. They weren't exactly humanist, but they were on their way to really saying people should be able to follow their conscience in their religious belief and shouldn't be made to feel bad or wrong for not following a religion that others have prescribed. It was radical, and this was significant change happening here in this new democracy that was known as America. And the more conservative Christians saw the Unitarians and the Universalists as a threat. But church after church converted to these new forms of religion all over New England. The famous King's Chapel, the first Anglican church in the country, took the tenets and the name Unitarian. So did the Church of the Pilgrim Fathers in Plymouth, Massachusetts. So did hundreds of churches throughout towns across New England. And you know what? It eventually made it all the way to Oklahoma. These new churches broke with old customs. They insisted on religious freedom and religious toleration. What was the foundation of their heresy? They believed that neither we nor the world would be saved by believing in a creed or a savior or being baptized in his name. They believed that we and our world would only be saved by people acting justly, using freedom, reason, and tolerance as their guide. Now, this led many prominent Unitarians of the time to become leaders in the anti-slavery and the abolition movements. Later, these same beliefs led many prominent and other Unitarians and Universalists to be leaders in the women's suffrage movement, preaching that women are equal and deserve the vote. These same core values led many now in the United Unitarian and Universalist churches, which came together in 1961, to march, and a couple of them to die with Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights movement. I'm thinking specifically of Reverend James Reeb and the layperson Viola Luiso, who both were killed in the March on Selma. It's important to acknowledge that Unitarians and Universalists and our churches were never 100% unified on any of these issues. There were always people within the pews and even ministers who disagreed with some of these stances that we now consider noble, because remember, the heretics of one generation often become the heroes of the next. There are many examples of Unitarian and Universalist complicity with racism and patriarchy and homophobia and white supremacy. We are not, it would be ridiculous for us to propose or to think that we were always enlightened and every person who ever attended our churches or served in our pulpits were that way. But I can say that there has always been a diversity of opinion in and among our congregations on social issues, on political issues, on theological issues in every era. And the heretics in one often became the heroes in the next. Now, fortunately, our people, we give each other the freedom to be wrong. The heretics in our churches in one generation who believed that slavery was evil, or believed that gay and lesbian people should be able to get married, or whatever the thing was that was going on in the time, that those people weren't always universally agreed with. So some people thought they were wrong-headed, some people thought they were dangerous, but we always allowed our members and our ministers the right to be wrong. By definition, as Unitarian Universalists, we do not require people to believe or think a certain way to be part of our congregations. We give each other the freedom to be wrong and still belong. Now, what's required for membership, then, in a congregation with this much diversity and this many different beliefs is not to have the right opinion, have the right belief, recite a creed, but it's about right action, how we live, how we're going to be together. And so we're clear that it's not what someone believes that makes them a good person, but it's what they do. And so we gather together based on the covenant that we read earlier, which is a sacred promise. Instead of a creed, we're bound together by a promise to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And anyone who is willing to agree to that promise with this group of people is welcome to be a member here. So what that means is that you, Hugh, you could believe this all began with Adam and Eve. And you, Lee, you could say that you believe that we were all seated on this planet by a UFO from another galaxy. And I could believe that you're both crazy. But as long as we're kind and we're respectful to one another and we don't do anything to harm the community, then we can all be members of the same community. We can all, despite our different views politically, socially, religiously, we can all help each other to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, love our neighbors, and be good people. That's why Dr. Diana Eck said that in a world divided by race and by religion and by ideology, the very presence of a congregation like ours is a beacon. It's because we love beyond belief. We put love over belief. And we value actions over opinions. And that allows for a rich diversity of people to gather together in one congregation. But recently, there's been developing a problem. Science writer Matthew Hudson explained it in an article in Politico a few years ago titled, "Why Liberals Aren't as Tolerant as They Think." This is the unfiltered part of my message. In his article, he reviewed the research that examined who's more prejudiced, conservatives or liberals, the religious or the non-religious. Now, I want to be clear what he means by prejudice. He's not defining it as a particular prejudice, like racism or homophobia. There are a lot of ways that we can negatively prejudge other people. By prejudice, he's talking about having a preconceived opinion about a person or a group of people that you consider to be hostile or unfavorable. The findings of his research confirmed that conservatives, liberals, the religious and the non-religious are each prejudiced against people with opposing views. More surprisingly, each group is about equally prejudiced. He says liberals might like to think of themselves as more open-minded, yet they are no more tolerant of people with opposing views than their conservative counterparts. Now, before you call me and the researchers a heretic and push us off the proverbial bridge, hear me out. Let's look into this word tolerance. In an article in Slate magazine, writer Scott Alexander uses a contemporary Buddhist story to make the point. An emperor summons before him Bodhidharma, the wisest Buddha of the time, living Buddha of the time. And he asks, "Master, I have been tolerant of innumerable gays, lesbians, bisexuals, asexuals, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, transgender people, and Jews. How many virtue points have I earned for my meritorious deeds?" Bodhidharma answers, "None at all." The emperor, somewhat put off, demands to know why. And the Bodhidharma asks, "Well, what do you think of gay people and Jews and the others you mentioned?" And the emperor answers, "Well, what do you think I am, some kind of homophobic, anti-Semitic bigot? Of course I have nothing against gay people or Jews or African Americans or Asians or any of those I mentioned." And the Bodhidharma answered, "And that's why you gain no merit for tolerating them. You've mistaken tolerance for acceptance." The word tolerance implies there's something to tolerate. Alexander's definition of true tolerance is respect and kindness to members of an out-group, not respect and kindness towards people that others consider an out-group, but people that you consider outside of your group as you define it. My colleague and New York Times bestselling author, Kate Braestrip, explained from this chancel a few months ago, if you were here, that real tolerance requires patience and perhaps something to forgive, something that might have to be tactfully overlooked in your relationship with someone else. If there's nothing to be patient about, nothing to forgive or overlook, then there's no tolerance. One of the most profound callings of a Unitarian Universalist is, can you offer kindness and dignity to the person who to you has the wrong color hat with a politician's name on it? Or the wrong bumper stickers on their car? Or the wrong view on some issue that you're passionate about, perhaps vaccinations, or masking, or voter ID laws, or Bibles in the school. We say tolerance is a low bar, and it is. We'd all rather be celebrated and accepted than just tolerated. And yet, it's a bar that I know I sometimes can barely get over in my own life. So this Unitarian Universalism is founded on the idea that all people are fundamentally equal and have inherent worth. All people. However, this is the big point. Ideas and beliefs are not all equal and are not all worthy. People are equal and worthy, all people, but not all ideas are equal and worthy. So we allow for free debate of ideas, and we give people freedom to question, and we give people freedom to be wrong. But no matter what, We always respect their inherent worth and dignity. And we must protect the freedom of belief. I'm seeing too often today that if someone disagrees, they get attacked personally. Their character gets questioned. I see it on social media all the time. People, they're not just attacking other people's ideas, they're attacking the person as well. They block them, they cancel them, they deplatform them, they call them names. And if Unitarian Universalists cannot tolerate differences of beliefs and opinions of others, even within our own community sometimes, then we are far from a beacon or the religion of the new millennium. We are far from spinning out a new fabric of belonging or a wider sense of we for the human community. In a world divided by race and by religion and by ideology, then I dare to say we're no longer part of the solution, but we're adding to the problem. So I don't know about you, but I don't need or want to be part of a congregation of people who all think alike. I prefer a congregation full of people who think for themselves. I prefer a congregation of people who are willing to risk prestige for justice. I prefer a congregation of people who are willing to be uncomfortable in the pursuit of a greater good. I prefer a congregation that allows for diversity of opinions, even political opinions, especially in a time like this. I prefer a congregation that lets each other be wrong and still belong. The truest test of any faith or philosophy is not its beliefs, but the actions it inspires in its followers. The reason that we don't push dissenters off of bridges is because we are called to love beyond beliefs. Okay? All right.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere.